So in the last video, we formatted dates using the Internationalizing API. So now let's actually format regular numbers. And let's start by doing some experiments in the console first before we move on to our application. So I'm just defining some number here. It doesn't really matter which one, just so we can experiment with it a little bit. Okay, so let's do the most basic formatting now, simply doing new, and then again, this Intl namespace. And now this time we use number format. And so this again takes in a local string. And so let's experiment with the US. Okay. And so all of this here creates a formatter. And then one more time on that, we can call the format method, where we then pass in what we actually want to format. And so that is this number. Let's just also log here to the console that this is about the US, so that we can then have some other locales as well. Okay, so you see that the number is now formatted using these dividers here. So these commas here as separators, so that it's easier to read 3,884,000 and so on. But let's see how it works in other countries. So in Germany, for example, it is different. Let's add some spaces here. Okay. And so here we want like this. And since we're doing this, let's try some other countries here as well. Let's just say Syria. Why not? So the one that I used earlier as well. So that is Arabic, and then the country is SY. And you see that in Germany, as in general in Europe, the separator is the dot, and then a comma for the decimal part. So basically just the opposite as it is in the US, as you see here. And then for Syria, well, it's even more different. I cannot even read this, of course. And of course, we can also just use the locale from the browser. So that will be navigator.language. And actually, let's log that here. And so, yeah, in the UK, it's basically the same as in the US. So again, this is just the most basic formatting, but let's now define an object here. So again, options for this formatting. But of course, now we have other properties in this object. It's no longer day or month or something like this, but instead we can specify the style, for example. And here we can say that this is a unit, and then we can set the unit property to something. And let's say mile per hour. And there are tons of units like this. And so as always, you can read more about the units that are available in the documentation. But let's see what happens now. No, but apparently nothing happens. Now we just need to pass in this options here, of course, into the number format function. So again, as a second argument, and let's do that here in all of the 4 at the same time, using these multiple cursors. And let's give it a save. And indeed, now we get this unit here. And one more time, you see that it's written differently in the US or in Germany, for example, or in Europe in general. And you see in Syria or in Arabic, apparently this is how you write miles per hour. Okay. But of course we can try others. For example, for temperatures, there is Celsius. And so indeed, we get degrees Celsius. So that is for units, but we can also say percent, and then the unit is completely ignored. So we get the percentage sign, and again, it is different in different countries. So here we have this space. And then there's also currency. So these are the three different options for the style. So that's unit, percent, or currency. And again, if we have a currency, then the unit is just completely ignored. But we do have to then define the currency. So let's say euro, and for that, it is like this. So EUR. And so if we give it a save, then we get indeed the euro sign. And so here in Europe, it comes after the number, and in the US, it comes before the number. And it's important to understand that we do indeed have to set this currency here, because the currency is not determined by the locale. Okay, so it's not defined by the country here, because it's of course possible to show, for example, euros in the US. All right, and so of course we have to define the currency here manually. So it's not going to be implied from the locale string. Okay. Finally, we can also turn off or on the grouping. So let's use grouping and let's experiment with false. And then you see that the number is just printed as it is without the separators, so the grouping. But let's get rid of this one here. And again, if you're interested in even more properties that you can set here in the options, then just check out the documentation here on MDN. Okay, but now what we're going to do is to actually use this knowledge and implement currencies here in our application. So let's move up here, and I'm going to start here in the movements. So where is that function? Now you see we have a lot of code here already, and in the real world we then split up all this code into different files, okay? Because as it is right now, it is indeed a little bit messy, but for now it is just okay as we have it. Now anyway, right now we are displaying the currency here in these movements right here. So we convert everything to 2 decimal places, and then we display the euro sign here ourselves. But now we want the Internationalization API to take care of all of this. So let's create a variable out here so that we don't have to do all that formatting here in the template literal. So we do it outside here. So let's call it formatted movement. And then again, we use new, and then number format. And now you already know that we have the locale right in the account object. And so that's again ACC, right? So just as we did here for formatting the date, we use ACC.locale. And then we also need an options object. And this time, let's actually write that object right here. So we need to set the style to currency. And then we need to define the currency property. So just as we did earlier in this video. And let's just experiment a little bit here. Let's say that we want US dollars instead of euros. Okay. And so now here we can get rid of all of this, including the euro sign, and now simply use this value. So formatted movement. Okay, give it a save. And now we need to, of course, log in here. But before doing that, I see already that we have some problem here with this object. And the problem is that we here didn't even call the format method. So all we did was to define this variable here as number format. And so that's then this formatter, remember. But on that, we then need to actually call the format method. And so this is where we pass in the value that should be formatted. And that is simply the current movement. So this mov value here. So if I save it now, then that should be fixed. And indeed, you already see US dollars right here. But anyway, let's log in as Jonas now. And yeah, everything is US dollars. However, the number itself here is of course still formatted in the Portuguese way. So that's the current locale of the current user. Remember? So that's Jonas, and the locale is PT. Remember? And so therefore, the number is still formatted in that way and not in an American way. That's only for the currency. Okay? So that's USD, but the rest is still according to the user's locale. So that's what I said earlier, that the currency is completely independent from the locale itself. So in this case, we have a European country with an American currency. All right. Now, indeed, we also have the currency in the accounts object. So we have the locale and also the currency. And so let's now get that currency also from the account itself. So that's right here. And so here we actually want account dot currency. So if I load it now, then indeed we get euros. All right. And if I log in as Jessica Davis, which has USD as the currency, then we get the dollars, and we get it also formatted in the American way. Because for Jessica Davis, the locale is also it is English in the US. And so this is what it looks like here, formatted for the US with US dollars. Of course, we could change this to euros, and then, of course, now we would have the euro sign. All right. So one more time, you can see how powerful this is and how easy it makes formatting for us developers. Okay. Now, anyway, that is the movements, but now we also have the currency in a lot of other places. For example, here in the balance, and then also down here in these statistics. So let's start to also implement the same formatting here in the balance. And so that is, that's right here. Okay, so here we also have this old way, basically, of formatting, but we know that we can do better. So we can now go ahead and grab all of this like this and paste it here and then use this. Okay. However, as you can guess, that is not a good practice because we are repeating the don't repeat yourself principle. Right? So let's get rid of this. And as you can guess, we will create a new function here, which will take care of formatting the currencies. So let's call it format cur, which stands for currency. So a new function. And let's create a very reusable function here. So instead of passing a whole account object into this function, which is very specific, of course, to this exact application, let's do a function that you could use in any other application. So basically a function that is less dependent on the underlying application data. Okay, and so instead, what we will do is to simply pass in all the data that this function needs to work with. So that's the value, the locale, and the currency. Okay, so again, we could pass the entire account object here instead of these two, but here we just want to do a reusable function. And so this is a lot better for that. All right. So this is the code that we had written earlier. And here we don't even need to create a new variable. All we will do is to return the result of this number format function. Now we just need to adapt this a little bit. So here it's just the locale that we get in here as an argument. And then here the same for the currency. And what we want to format is the value that we get in. All right. So again, a nice and simple reusable function that can take any value, any locale, and any currency, and will then return this value here nicely formatted for that locale and currency. So let's use that here. So of course, instead of what we had before, formatted mov will now become format the currency, and then the value is mov, the locale, which I think is the second one. Yeah, it is. So it's very handy, again, here in VS Code to just hover over the function name. So the locale is at account.locale and the currency at account.currency. And so we can get rid of this. Now I will just copy this part here. And so now what we want to format is account.balance. Okay. And we actually don't even have to store it into a separate variable first. We can just take this result directly and then display it as a text content here in our application. So if I log in now as Jonas, then this should already be nicely formatted. And indeed, it is. So we see we have this nice separator here, which makes our number easier to read. And now as Jessica Davis, it should be the American separator. So with the comma here. Okay, so that's great. All that's left now is these three values down here. All right, but that should be easy enough with the function that we already created. So let's just copy it here. And then we simply basically need to paste it here to these three places. So here it is the incomes that we want to format, right? So incomes. Then here it is this part here. So the absolute value of the out. And then finally down here, it is the interest. Now I copied that code from earlier. So again, it is this interest that we want to format now. So interest. And indeed, you can already see, even without logging in, that it worked down here. So we have this nice separator here indeed. And so if we log in again with Jessica Davis to see it as US dollars, then we get this nice result here as well. Beautiful. And actually, that's it for the internationalization API. That's all I had to show you. But as I told you right in the beginning, there is a lot more potential in this API.